So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the who, what, when, where, why, and how do I feel about classic albums in my collection. If TV show length episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as TikTok. This was supposed to be last week's episode, but I got so sick. I was seriously like 2 whole weeks ahead in filming, and then my neighbor decided to blow leaves that don't exist because it's January. In case you're new here, he's batshit crazy. And then I got sick. Awesome. We did manage to get a podcast episode up though. We made that happen. My first script of season 3 of the Dolls Pod tells the story of founding member of the Supremes and muse of the musical Dreamgirls, Florence Ballard. I've loved the Dreamgirls movie since it came out and have always been fascinated by the true story behind it. You know I love writing about the women of Motown Records. I'm glad we got to tell Flo Ballard's story this week. The Dolls Pod is available wherever you stream your podcasts. Apple and Spotify are linked in the description. On to this week's album. The last time I covered these guys in, I think it was April, I said that this would probably be the next album of theirs I landed on. Here we are. This week's album is The Grateful Dead, Live Dead. Congrats if you guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my posts tab. That's where I post the hints to what the next album is gonna be. I make announcements, I host polls, you can find all of that on my channel, and if you so choose, you can always read the written versions of my reviews on my website, linked in the description. Alright, let's take the plastic off. So my copy of Live Dead is a repress. Judging from the white labels, my guess is this is from sometime in the late 70s or early 80s. And as I complain about every time I run into an album formatted this way, this was back when they were still pressing Live Dead with sides 1 and 4 on disc 1 and sides 2 and 3 on disc 2. This is so that with an automatic record changer, you can just drop the disc down and it'll play sides 1 and 2 somewhat seamlessly. Not really, because there are fade outs and fades in on Live Dead. I just don't like albums formatted this way, okay? This is like an established thing of mine. I bought this copy from, where else? Turn It Up Records in Northampton, Massachusetts. They are one of my favorite record stores in all of New England. I've bought like 25 Vinyl Monday albums from them easily. Now let's talk about the cover art. This illustration is everything I love about the mid-century medieval craze, waning in popularity by 1969, and an aesthetic the Dead never really employed. Even at the height of their psychedelic power, the Dead's visual language was more, well, straight psychedelic and American. I associate mid-century medieval with the British Isles anyway. This illustration for Live Dead by Bob Thomas is so mid-century medieval. The lettering, the spade print inside of it, brocade swirls, the crowned orb our auburn-haired lady holds, and the color palette. Pinks, reds, oranges, blue, green, and gold. I feel like I'm looking at a psychedelic interpretation of a medieval tapestry. I wrote one of my theses on textiles, so this is just lighting up all the corners of my brain. Flip to the back, and it's very clearly America in 1969. Stars and stripes and skulls and crossbones used to write the Dead in Live Dead. And also acid. The Dead loved plays on lettering like this. See the American Beauty cover, which I still can't figure out. Opening up the gatefold, we have plenty of photography by Jim Marshall, Herb Green, and Florence Nathan. Bob looks so young here. He looks like the baby of the family, which he was. On Live Dead, we have the 60s era lineup of The Grateful Dead. That's Jerry Garcia on vocals and guitar, our dearly recently departed Bob Weir on guitar, harmony vocals, and vocals on the 11. He's joined Jerry and Pigpen McKernan on keys and lead vocals on Turn On Your Love Light, as well as Phil Lesh on bass and harmony vocals, trucking on past our mortal plane. Still with us today are Tom Constantin on keys and Mickey Hart and Bill Kreutzmann on drums. We also have auxiliary member of the Grateful Dead, Robert Hunter, joining the party. Live Dead was produced by the Grateful Dead with Owsley Stanley, Bob Matthews, and Betty Cantor. Roll transition. This episode is going to be a little different. This is not going to be strictly a Live Dead episode, as a lot happened between its recording and release. I've covered the Dead in '68, and I've covered the Dead in 1970. I want to look at the Dead in 1969. It was a pivotal year for the group, as Mickey Hart acknowledged. Quote, "I don't think it was an intellectual choice, but I think there was a gray area that we were passing through." It, of course, referring to the Dead's stonedness. Let's first pull back to the Dead in 1968, around the release of Anthem of the Sun. Fucking phenomenal little record with Bob Weir's first real shining moment, The Other One, on it. Critics loved Anthem, but it was just too Dead to succeed, you know? Warner Brothers struggled to handle Anthem. It's not a studio album, and it's definitely not a live album. It's an anthem. How do you promote that? You just kinda don't. The Dead's audience to market to was still so small back then. The promo single for this album was a 2-minute ditty called Dark Star. Star crashing. The Grateful Dead, 2 minutes? You've gotta be kidding me. Of course this thing failed. A little 7-inch single just couldn't capture what the Dead were capable of. Hell, a single album hardly could. As Michael Lydon, writing for Rolling Stone, said, Anthem came into a rapidly changing world. Since Monterey Pop, what San Francisco started has become so diffuse, copied, extended, exploited, rebelled against, and simply accepted that it has become nearly invisible. One can't say acid rock now without embarrassed quotations. The process of absorption has been so smoothly quick that it is hard to remember when it was all new, when Wes Wilson posters were appearing fresh every week, when Owsley Acid was not just a legend or mythical standard, when only real freaks had hair down past their shoulders, when 40-minute songs were revolutionary, and when a dance was not a concert, but a stoned-out bacchanal. By 1968, the San Francisco sound was already pretty co-opted by major labels, and the Dead found themselves in positively corporate spaces. Like the Playboy After Dark television show. Of course, they dosed the whole set, Hugh Hefner included. The back to basics thing that I covered extensively over the summer is beginning to usurp psych. Music is returning to something homier and more familiar in response to the generational loss of innocence that 1968 dealt. The Dead themselves were right in the middle of this. They played several demonstrations, including the one at Columbia University, but they found their lighthearted approach was way out of touch, man. Phil said, quote, "We all thought of this as a prank, the ultimate guerrilla music mission," while the students were in a much more serious frame of mind. Cue the '68 DNC and the riots in Chicago. I have a whole episode centered around that. Richard Nixon is elected president in the fall. This triggers a pendulum swing in a big way. The Smothers Brothers show is canceled. The Dead's inner world is changing too. In 1968, Neil Cassidy, aka Dean Moriarty, aka the subject of The Other One, passes away in Mexico. This loss deeply affected Bobby, who always looked up to Neil and considered him the patriarch of the Grateful Dead family. Quote, "We're all siblings. We're all underlings to this guy, Neil Cassidy. He had a guiding hand, though it was good and strange." If the Grateful Dead is a family, then they're losing their family homes. They've lost their rehearsal space due to noise complaints. The carousel, run by the Dead, the Airplane, and Big Brother and the holding company, they all lacked the business know-how to actually run the place. That becomes the Fillmore West. Then you have the Avalon, who are quickly running out of money as a third of attendees don't actually pay for tickets. They sneak in through the back door. Or someone just lets them in the front. This is San Francisco, man. You just rely on the goodwill of your fellow brother and sister. It's all peace and love here, man. Yeah, it's all peace and love till you lose your dance permit and your lease due to noise complaints. The innocent, lively San Francisco of the acid tests is ancient history. Jerry said, quote, "What the Kesey thing was depended on who you were when you were there. It was open, a tapestry, a mandala. It was whatever you made it. Okay, so you take LSD and suddenly you were aware of another plane, or several other planes, and the quest is to extend that limit, to go as far as you can go." Phil said the Dead had gone about as far as they could go. Once you've delivered yourself of that radical a rethinking, it's just not workable to keep repeating yourself in the same vein. For continued growth, it's necessary to take an almost dialectical approach, to consider the polar opposite. This is how you have the Dead moving in two different directions at the same time in 1969, condensing on record, expanding live. Let's start with the expansion. Mickey discovers the work of Ala Rakha, Ravi Shankar's tabla player. It sparks his interest in polyrhythms, which Phil jumps right onto. Oh, a 7/4? Don't threaten that guy with a good time! An experiment in 12/8 is shortened by one beat to make it 11/8. That, of course, bore the 11. Linked with that anthem single Dark Star, a new song called St. Stephen, and an extended romp on Turn On Your Love Light. The 11 rounds out the Dead's latest live show suite. While the rhythm section is working in some f***off time sigs, Robert Hunter and Jerry Garcia move in together and write up a storm. Since the timelines overlap so hard, and I'm honestly not crazy about the production of this album, this is the closest to an Aoxo Moxoa episode you will ever get from me. Production on that record began in September of 1968, 1 month after the release of Anthem of the Sun. Aoxo Moxoa sessions deal some signature Grateful Dead nonsense. Not only do we have all the chemical elements of Anthem, we've added nitrous oxide. That's right, the Grateful Dead didn't just make such weird shit in the 1960s because of the LSD. They were on laughing gas. And they're messing with even more money. They sank $100,000 into the production of Aoxo Moxoa. Adjusted for inflation today, that's... Jesus fucking Christ! Where are they getting this kind of money? They weren't getting that kind of money. But they were playing acoustic guitars. Mickey said, quote, "The electric side was so fun and so stimulating and so rewarding and so energetic. And then all of a sudden we were starting to explore the soft side of the GD. And I thought, what a beautiful thing. Acoustic guitars. It was cold out there in the feedback, electric GD world. It was a great cold, a wonderful freeze, full of exploratory moments and great vision. But here we were exploring the soft side. I thought it was really cool." With that, we somehow condense on record all the guys save for Pigpen move out of hippie haven turned tourist trap San Francisco for neighboring townships. Being out of San Francisco means that they're tripping less. You know, save for the Fillmore West gig in which the apple juice was dosed so hard they could taste the LSD in it. Poor Phil was so high, he forgot what music was and how to play his instrument. He had to be led on stage by Mickey. Mickey becomes the caretaker of a ranch in Nevada. The guys smoke ungodly amounts of grass and ride horses. They write more songs on their acoustic guitars. They come back to the blues. Well, Pig never left. They incorporate Death Have No Mercy into their set staples at this time.
Death don't have no mercy. In his name.
The guys go on a tour of the Midwest in the winter of 1969. When they come back, they found that Pacific Recording has upgraded their equipment to a cutting-edge Ampex 16-track console. And they figure, what the hell, let's re-record the whole of Aoxomoxoa with this! Quote, "The gnashing of teeth of Warner Brothers corporate headquarters could be heard the length and breadth of the land." But before we piss off Warner even more, we need to pay off the debt that we've already accrued. We're not much of businessmen here. I don't know if you've picked up on that yet. We just sort of throw money that we don't have at our problems. But we're 6 figures in the hole. We can't exactly do that. Like Anthem was spliced together from several gigs. I believe there are 7 that we know of. I'll have to double check this in my notes. What would become Live Dead was assembled from 3 nights of recording. The first attempt was a bust. Bob's input went kaput because this is the Grateful Dead. Why would anything be quick, efficient, or go remotely to plan? This bust night was January 25th, 1969 at the Avalon. They recorded the very next night, the 26th there. That makes it on the record, as well as February 27th and March 2nd at the Fillmore West. The full Fillmore gigs were released as a box set many years down the line. The operation includes Ron Wickersham, a former Ampex engineer, plus Bob Matthews and his apprentice, Betty Cantor. And, of course, their sound guy / chemist, Bear Stanley. They brought Pacific's console with them. This made Live Dead one of the first rock albums ever recorded with 16-track technology, if not the first. Bill said so anyway. We hauled it up the steps of the Avalon and later the Fillmore West, and we became the first band ever to make a live 16-track recording. We weren't trying to make history. We were just trying to record a live album. Though it wouldn't be out for several months, having Live Dead in the can saved the Grateful Dead's asses. Had they not had something to show for, it is highly unlikely that Warner would have let them finish Aoxomoxoa. Speaking of Warner, hanging in the back of Aoxo / Live Dead production is some serious business trouble. Rock Scully and John McIntyre, also not much of businessmen. Who would have thought? Enter Mickey's dad, Lenny Hart. This guy was sketchy from day one. He wouldn't let anyone see the books, wouldn't let anyone else handle the money. Bill Graham and Jonathan Reister sounded the alarm, but like Alan Klein and the Beatles, no one listened. Aoxomoxoa drops in June. It is released as the Dead are establishing themselves as a must-see live act. So it's actually really smart that they have a live album in the can. Ironically, they blew the most important gig of their career to date. The Dead were booked for $2,500 to play the Woodstock Music and Art Fair, a 3 or 4-day excursion on a farm in Bethel, New York. I made a video on Michael Wadley's Woodstock film and the soundtrack. I briefly mentioned the Dead set. According to the Dead themselves, it was one of the worst gigs they ever played. The ground wire was submerged in 6 inches of water and mud. Poor Bobby got knocked on his ass by an electric shock, and Phil heard the helicopter radio from the pickups in his bass. It is a goddamn miracle none of the performers died. After this very active summer and fall with gigs at the Fillmore East and the Cafe A Go-Go, the stage is finally set for the release of their first official live album. The track listing of Live Dead goes as follows. Opening up disc 1 and taking up the entirety of side 1 is Dark Star. Side 2 opens with Saint Stephen, and disc 1 closes with The 11. Opening up disc 2 and taking up the entirety of side 3 is Turn On Your Love Light. Opening up side 4, we have Death Don't Have No Mercy, followed by Feedback, and the album closes with And We Bid You Goodnight. Live Dead was released on November 10th, 1969, less than 5 months after Aoxomoxoa. This thing came at just the right time. That week, Janis Joplin and New Kids on the Block Santana both occupied Billboard's top 10. Live Dead stands as the second of their 4 albums in just 18 months, the most productive they ever were as an active band. The Rolling Stone review was written by Lenny Kaye. He admired how the group were so agile with using their own material as little more than frameworks for what they do. Not unlike... I deserve therapy for this. Quote, a jamming band, and the Dead are that, if nothing else, has to rely on its sense of flow, with a capital F, on its talent in taking that small series of steps which will ultimately bring it to some entirely different place from where it started. The song sequence of Stephen, the 11, and Turn On Your Love Light is, quote, beautifully conceived and done, each piece clicking together perfectly. He also recognized the studio magic. Yes, the Dead are consistently inconsistent, but the cuts aren't meant to camouflage that. They're meant to immerse a listener in a most perfect version of the aforementioned capital F flow. The flow state, if you will. Quote, if you'd like to visit a place where rock is likely to be in about 5 years, you might think of giving Live Dead a listen or two. Oh, how wrong he was! The 2-minute Dark Star reappears on the soundtrack for Michelangelo Antonioni's Zabriskie Point. Several groups, including the Dead and Pink Floyd, made their respective attempts at scoring this thing. Antonioni was very difficult to please. After this, TC quietly parts ways with the Dead. His prepared piano was getting too weird for the Dead slowly grounding their sound. He was never interested in the chemical element, and he was a Scientologist, which the Dead did not fuck with. 1969 has officially arrived in California. The People's Park is torn down by authorities. Berkeley marches in protest. The protesters are fired on with buckshots. The National Guard turns up. One passes away of his injuries. The Dead turned up to raise bail money, but that show went sideways. Hippies are demonized by the media after the Tate LaBianca killings. Angela Davis was fired from UCLA as part of the FBI's efforts to squash the Black Panthers. The Chicago 8 trial was a major component in the FBI's efforts to squash the counterculture overall. That trial became its own whole circus. Phil Oakes was summoned to testify over the Pegasus thing, and there was a mistrial after Black Panther Bobby Seale was bound and gagged in court. The Chicago 8 became the Chicago 7. In October of 1969, Jack Kerouac, the author of the text that arguably kicked off the whole cultural craziness that was the 1960s, passed away. The formal death of the 1960s happened about a month after the release of Live Dead. I've spoken about it in passing on this channel many times, but I've never done an in-depth analysis. I still don't feel this is the album for such, but I can't not mention the Grateful Dead at Altamont, specifically how they got involved and their role in everything that went down that night. Now, the Grateful Dead tried to plan a Wild West-themed festival that summer, but that fell through. In September, Rock Scully went to London under the guise of bringing Woodstock to Hyde Park. There was a free show memorial for Brian Jones there in July that worked out really well. In reality, Rock is smuggling acid to some rock stars. He is, of course, busted at Heathrow. He calls Chelsea Milliken for help. He brings the Stones' stage manager Sam Cutler. They planned the Stones at Hyde Park together. What are the chances? Woodstock at Hyde Park turns into Woodstock of the West. The Dead are down. Then the Stones come along, and their entire camera crew. They've been making a documentary with the Mayles brothers to hopefully compete with Wadley's upcoming Woodstock film. This will still be a free show, but now the scale has increased tenfold. The venue appears to be the Sears Point Raceway. Now stay with me here. Sears Point was also owned by the concert promoters who thought they had the right to promote this show. They do not. Bill Graham did. Sears gets pissed, demand that the Stones pay the insurance policy and movie rights to use Sears Point. They say hell no, making for venue change number 2. Altamont Speedway. The third band involved in this event, the Jefferson Airplane, they're on tour, so they can't okay this new venue or the security. Hell's Angels. They rely on Michael Lang and Rock Scully's approval. They say yes, so the Dead say yes, and from testimony of Paul Kantner and Grace Slick, the Rolling Stones say yes. You can imagine how all these last-minute changes and this intercontinental game of telephone would become a nightmare, and that is exactly what happened. From backstage at Altamont, the Dead saw people rushing to the stage and getting beaten back with pool cues. From that alone, they decided it was not safe to play. They nope the f*** out of there. Had Rock Scully not okayed the venue change, Altamont wouldn't have gone down the way it did. Rock, and the Grateful Dead by association, had blood on their hands, just as the Airplane did for okaying the Hells Angels, and the Stones by association through Sam Cutler. Once the fatal car crash outside the Speedway and the killing of Meredith Hunter appeared in the papers, they knew this to be true. Phil said, quote, "The Grateful Dead should have known better, but several factors clouded our minds and prevented us from seeing disaster approaching. The fact that the band wasn't directly involved in the planning of the event, the lack of communication between our team and the Stones, and between our management and band. To add insult to injury, remember Lenny Hart? Something's not adding up because Pig's organ was repoed off the stage this fall. Lenny extended the guy's contract with Warner Brothers without their knowledge or consent, took off with the advance and the rest of the Dead's money, putting them right back in the debt they worked their tails off to get out of this year. The hippie dream is thoroughly dead, both outside and inside the Dead circle. Cue the brown 1970s. The Dead fully ditch the psychedelics after they lose Bear Stanley to 2 years in the slammer. They turn inwards and begin their journey from hippie saints to good little capitalists. Michael Lydon predicted as much for his Rolling Stone cover story 4 months before. Quote, "Rock and roll, rather some art, became the prime expression of that community, San Francisco, because it was rock, machine and all, the miracle beauty of American mass production, a mythic past, a global fantasy, an instantaneous communications network, and a maker of superheroes. The excitement of San Francisco was the attempt to synthesize these two contradictory positions. To pull it off would have been a revolution. At best, San Francisco made a reform. In the long haul, its creators, tired of fighting the paradox, chose modified rock over folk music. All except the Grateful Dead, who've been battling it out with that mother of a paradox for years. Sometimes they lose, sometimes they win." So, what do I think of Live Dead? Since the last time I've covered the Dead, Bob Weir has trucked on. Anthem would be a perfect tribute to him. His very spirit, the youthful jokester, the baby of the family, is instilled in that weird and wonderful and truly unique album, my favorite Grateful Dead album as it stands. Through examining this album and this Dark Star specifically, hopefully you'll see why these albums are intrinsically linked, and why I chose to move forward with this tribute in this way. But first I need to drink my tea before it gets cold. Hey, like my mug? Pretty sweet. Yeah, that was a birthday gift from one of my college friends. It's gonna be a really hard couple years for Grateful Dead fans. It has already been a really hard couple years. We lost Phil Lesh in 2024. That's why I made that American Beauty episode. The Deadheads as a whole, which I'm like on the very, very, very fringes of. I don't call myself a Deadhead, but I'm like definitely on the bus, if that makes sense. The Deadheads are going to have to figure out how to carry forward with the Dead's music and message without the guys here. It's like, how do you carry forward the spirit of the 60s without the 1960s? What do you do after that innocence has died? Or in this case, after the corporal body has passed? You gotta hold on to the spirit somehow. Audiences seeing Ravi Shankar live would applaud after simply hearing his group tune up. I feel the Dead were tapping into that here. The guys amble into musical position. Phil gets there first with his wandering bass. Jerry and Bob answer in short phrases. There's some drumming on the toms that soon drops out for some cymbals. But no one's in a rush. It takes a full minute and 33 seconds of gently modulating chords into the shape of a dark star before we hear the first recognizable bit of Dark Star. One 4-note motif repeated 3 times. As if a signal to ground control. Suit up, boys. We're spacewalking tonight. Brightness arrives, with Jerry's exclamations on guitar around 2 minutes and 15 seconds in. I've described these as sparklers in the night in the past. They're the first clear and bright things we hear in this murky soundscape, especially the curls and licks at 4 minutes and 33 seconds. Bobby's rhythm moves in. Hear how he responds to Jerry's bursts with his own. At 2 minutes and 50 seconds, we hear the organ. These waterfalls act as a connective tissue between the guitar and the bass. Phil mimics that several minutes later with a trip down the fretboard. The drums are building up, but I don't hear a kick for almost 5 minutes. This movement is an extended, paced group conversation. Several distinct voices taking their time to come together. Gravity pulling matter together to form the star. The instruments ebb for Jerry's reedy, youthful voice, occasionally dropping the melody, but he holds on to that gorgeous tempo shift with the organ. Robert Hunter's lyrics give all these sounds we're hearing an image. Dark star crashes, pouring its light into ashes. Reason tatters, the forces tear loose from the axis. This is the psychedelic experience, sure, but Hunter describes star death. This is the life cycle we will traverse through the music of Dark Star. Birth, life, and death. If you strip the percussion, Dark Star would lose a lot of its power. The wood percussion and the bongos, they give us something we can hold on to while these phrases amble around each other. The gong. It crests into big booms and crashes in chords at 8 minutes and 20 seconds. When combined, it sounds like bells. A big gate in the sky is opened for Jerry and Phil's extended duet. I've had several listens of this Dark Star where it felt like meandering. Maybe it's because the center of gravity in this composition is so open. The key to not getting sucked out of it is holding onto the unit of the 3, Jerry, Bobby, and Phil. 2 gas giants, Jerry and Phil, and the short phrases, Bobby's swirling around them like rings. If you hold onto this unit, they hit a gold spot. Listen to how they pull in and out with their dynamics. The phrases at 11 minutes and 45 seconds feel like watching a satellite trace in and out versus the noise and feedback at 13 minutes. Bringing us into the second extended Jerry solo. I have to admit, this Dark Star, he gets a little lost in the sauce. He's just repeating phrases until I think Bill changes the time signature and snaps him out of it. I talked about this with Mountain Jam a couple years back. One of the guys will get lost or stuck. That's just how jams go. It's up to the group to course correct. How do we do that? Either we come back to the A in the traditional A-B-A jazz structure. A, in this case, would be Jerry's sung melody. Do, do do do. He references that several times on his guitar, so it doesn't feel totally alien by the time he eventually sings the second verse. Or you can ebb and flow. Dynamics are how Dark Star can sustain itself for 20 minutes. We've only gotten tastes of improvisational Dead on record before, and that was heavily augmented in the studio. Dark Star here has a whole side of an album to roam without a lot of obstacles, except for the guys occasionally getting in each other's way. Releasing Dark Star in this format was crucial to the Dead's evolution, the extension of ideas that they worked with on Anthem. This Dark Star is why I chose Live Dead to pay tribute to Bob Weir. I feel he was the conduit of the psychedelic Dead. His vision from the other one is realized once again. The other one's soul manifests in this other moment, the other psychedelic Dead masterpiece. This time, they didn't need tape cuts to capture this feeling. That's how much they've grown as musicians in just a year and a half. It's kind of incredible when you think about it. At the very end of Dark Star, we introduce an idea that will soon become a fixture in the Dead's compositions. Squiggly harmonies. Phil takes the second part on Shall We Go, You and I While We Can, and I believe Bobby sang the high part. The guys got to harmonizing through hanging out with Crosby, Stills, and Nash on Mickey's Ranch. The Dead style, though, is a lot more idiosyncratic and precarious than CSN's. Sometimes they stick it, sometimes they just don't. I will say, the one thing I'm missing from the studio recording of Dark Star, the one that became the single, are the drones. As you will hear from my commentary on a track later on this album, I love my psychedelic feedback drones. Thank you for your patience. We can actually talk about St. Stephen now. St. Stephen combines mythologies on the lyrics. A Christian martyr, one of the 7 muses, a real Stephen in the Dead's San Francisco Circle. The repeated images of flora, roses and ivy, celestial images, and bright colors invoke the Dead's distinct visual language in song. Like we did on Dark Star, we have to settle into something St. Stephen shaped, this time introduced by a feedback futz and the teasing guitar part. It's like they know they'll get a hearty yeah once Phil kicks into gear, and we do get a hearty, enthusiastic after the second verse. Jerry never liked going slow on the St. Stephen bridge. I see why it had to happen, though. If we were to just go right through the song at this one linear pace, it wouldn't warrant its 6 minutes. The place we come out at, the harmony of the guitars and bass, is much sweeter. Also, that second bridge with the military drums would make significantly less sense than it does to begin with. It's goofy, it's weird, I'm here for it. Stephen runs right into part 3 of our Dark Star suite, the 11. Clearly, the musicians on this stage are very comfortable with connecting one composition to the next with an extended solo. They have the confidence that they'll be spit out in the plane they want to be spat out of the wormhole at. The 11 is a showcase of what the Grateful Dead's rhythm section was working on in 1969. Fucked up time signatures. Yes, we are in 11. No, I cannot keep track of where the 1 is. It is slightly offensive how this big and wily of an ensemble can be so comfortable in 11. There are these strange motions of what I believe are both TC and Pigpen on the organ. Phil mentions them both playing at the same time in his book. Phil's own busy bass line is so much fun to listen to, and it's all topped off with double drummed up goodness. Jerry's guitar tone is sharp and bright. I believe this is his SG era. Bobby is softer and hitting his signature waterfall glissandos amidst the chaos. Phil's tone gets nasty at 3 minutes and 5 seconds. This 9 minutes flies by, and we fly through the utterly nonsensical lyrics. The guys' harmonies stumble all over each other, Bobby's trying for his falsetto and hoping something lands. This isn't the time to worry about the perfection of the minute detail, though. We're trying for the perfect picture, formed by church bell squeals and a minute-long gear-up for the final chapter of our Dark Star suite. Now, albums like Live Dead are where the limitations of the vinyl format show. Not only did this side-long Turn On Your Love Light see it pushed off the same side as the other two parts, it's on a totally different disc. This is made even worse by my up disc situation. That perfectly orchestrated slide from the 11 to the rhythm and blues shuffle, it just fades out. We totally lose it. And the silence as we have to change the record takes us right out of the party. Thankfully, the party doesn't stop. We just kind of left to go get ice and we come back and not much has happened. We didn't miss anything crazy. You know the saying, boys start fights, but men finish them? The boys of the Grateful Dead could start a show, but Pigpen knew how to finish one. Pig's gruff voice was well suited for the bluesy and R&B cuts. He's kind of bridging the gap between, like, the f***ed up the rhythm section is doing and the coming back to earth that Jerry and Robert Hunter are focused on. His inherent charm, really masculine and likely smelling of beer and tobacco, that could work a crowd. Not everyone gets the jazzy stuff, but everyone gets a guy with a mustache. Pigpen starts up at a minute and 15 seconds, right? He breaks for a fabulous double drum solo. I love how Mickey and Bill fill in each other's gaps without trying to dominate what's going on. Then Pig goes on ad-libbing for like 8 minutes, bringing it up and down with the drums stamping behind him. It's like a smoky, groovy Baptist dive bar church. When the rest of the guys come in to fill out his call and response at 4 minutes and 55 seconds, it just puts a smile right on my face. A stoned barbershop R&B backing vocal is just funny. This is a brotherhood. It's like hearing someone pick up an instrument in the room down the hall from yours and like sticking your head in to join. Listening to this and Death Don't Have No Mercy, it's kind of incredible that we started this record with a 23-minute largely improvised excursion. This is a grounded, soulful, deep, and dark Dead. Not dark Dead like a celestial black hole, a mortal dark Dead that can deliver a believable blues. This is a well-rounded band on Death Don't Have No Mercy and a fabulous vocal performance by Jerry. Dynamic drumming and the organ hits every emotional note right. Mournful, heartfelt, occasionally crying out. I have to point out the significance of a song about the black dog showing up on one's doorstep as performed by the Dead in 1969. This Live Dead era represents the final months before the black dog came and sat on the Dead's front step. Losing Jimi Hendrix and their good friend Janis Joplin, Jerry's grandma passing away, Phil's dad passing away, and the slow breakdown of Pigpen's health. He will be the first member of the band to pass away a few years later. This is a band that hasn't yet had to reckon with their mortality. Singing a song about having to reckon with your mortality. You see the tragic irony there? As for the feedback, listen, not everyone has the patience for something like this, but I am a Sonic Youth fan. I will excuse 8 minutes of feedback easily. It arcs through the air, swirls, it slithers like a snake, and crunches and shakes my sternum. Whereas the traversing through the jazzy black hole might be the sound of someone else's meditative state, feedback is my meditative state. This is my soul frequency. Drums crash. TC gives the last of his whacked out keyboard contributions. It was only like this once, and I'm grateful that that was included. And then you get a crooked a cappella and We Bid You Goodnight for Dessert. What a whole trip we went on. From far out spaces down to Earth again. Mickey described this process from Anthem, Aoxomoxoa, Live Dead to Workingman's Dead, and then American Beauty as, quote, stepping out of our spacesuit and coming down to Earth, and putting on a pair of Oshkosh and digging the furloughs. After this, the Dead put their jazz inclinations on pause for a while. At least until the weather report suite on Wake of the Flood. God, I can't fucking wait to talk about Wake of the Flood now. They turned to country and the blues, bluegrass, as a way to cope with the turbulent year of 1969. And it's a really good thing that they had that medicine, because they'll need it to cope with the hellish year that would be their 1970. This is the necessary step to maturity for this band. I've seen some publications naming Live Dead as the best Grateful Dead album. Do I agree? No. I'm firmly on Anthem and American Beauty for that one. Do I even think this was their best live album? No. I'd pick Europe 72, or you have so many new options from bootlegging and official releases. Cornell 77, anyone? Live Dead, I will say, is the whole 60s Grateful Dead package. Everything they did best at this point in their career. The R&B romps, whacked out time signatures. I've said whacked out way too many times in this episode, but it's an Abigail Devoe phrase, okay? Extended improvised solos with bizarro roots that we take to make them make sense with each other. That's all here. Even though not all of these recordings of songs are my favorite recordings of these songs. Live Dead, I appreciate for being the dying gasp of the Psychonaut Dead. Acid cowboys trade their Dayglow pistols for horses and good weed. Goodbye, innocent 1960s. Hello, mortality and consequences. My personal favorites off this one are the whole thing. The Dark Star Suite, Death Don't Have No Mercy, Feedback, and We Bid You Goodnight. Even though it's taken from 3 shows, it's all one to me. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that is it. That has to be it, because my voice is going out. That was our next Grateful Dead episode, Live Dead. I probably am going to stick with my plan that I gave back in the Anthem episode, going from this to Europe 72 to Wake of the Flood. I just feel that's a good progression. Of course, this is going to take place across many, many months. It takes me a long time to circle back to any one group. Rest in peace, Bob Weir. That Anthem of the Sun episode was the most fun I had had in months making a Vinyl Monday. The first truly lighthearted episode in probably 6 months of the series at that point, and I've had a lot of fun making this episode. What do you think of this album? What do you think of the Grateful Dead? Leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love, and remember, despite what some guy on the internet says, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I will be continuing on with my usual Black History Month picks after this. The rest of February will consist of wonderful and worthy Black artists. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday, Monday mornings at 11, and a new episode of the Dolls podcast every other Friday at noon. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!
You the best, and I bid you good night.